Nisha!
Hey.
Oh, look at you all. Stunning and glowy. Oh my goodness.
Thank you.
Oh my gosh. Well, we'll jump right in. I know you're busy. You're about to have your baby, so we won't keep you long here. But love, why don't you start us off by just telling the ladies listening a little bit about yourself and how you found yourself on this journey?
Sure. I'm a little bit of a late bloomer. I spent most of my life trying to work on my career. So I'm fortunate enough to have two doctorate degrees. One's in pharmacy and one in medicine. And it took me a while to find the right partner for me, which is really super important. And so once I did, we decided that we wanted to have a baby. So we tried, and then early last year we had a miscarriage. And then I sought out professional help to figure out, what was going on. And I think like a lot of women that are listening to this, I was told that you really don't have a chance of getting pregnant. Your lab values are really low. Your AMH is like non-existent. You're pre-menopausal. I would just try to get a surrogate or go for adoption. And I'm fortunate enough that my training in medicine is in osteopathic medicine. So I truly believe that the body has regenerative potential. So, I tied my hair up and decided I was going to, figure out, how to make my body work for me and figure out what blockages I have. So I'm a true believer, I have a big spiritual side in me, and I have, this big sort of this mind-body connection, and I know that it's super important. So in that process, I found you and I found your podcasts.
And that didn't scare you away, woman?
And I was like, there's something really real about her that I need to just, go in and, a part of me just needs to open up. And I think this has been something that I had to focus on throughout my pregnancy. And even now, it was just sort of finding my voice and being my advocate. And I think that's something that you've helped me do. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
So I joined your program. I created my bump squad. I found doctors that and specialists when I called them up, and at this point they're like, "You're 44 years young," and I said, I was literally shocked, and they're like, "Are you still there? Hello?" And I'm like, "I've never heard anybody say that before," and I guess I realized. Through the work that we did over the 8 weeks that I had to learn to be my own advocate, and I have to fight for the things that are important for me. And what is important is my relationship, and what's important is this baby. And I had to put that first. And I think once that solidified, I don't know, I was, I found out that I was pregnant, and then I called you, and I think you were on your way to Disney World. And I'm like, I know this might be inappropriate, but I have to tell you that, wow, this shit works. It works.
And I remember, because we were actually, we were in Orlando. I told my husband, hey, I got to take this call. I'm going to talk to Nisha. You go get us checked in. I got a conversation to have. I mean, but I think this is such a powerful example, Nisha, because with all of your training, it would have been really easy for you to say, oh, I just need to throw in the towel. I know what the numbers are. My values are in the gutter. I mean, what was it within you though? Because I find this just such an inspiring example, because it's really, a lot of people just hear a number and they're like, oh, it's over for me.
Yeah.
Like, what was it in you that said no?
I think it's true. And it's funny because some of my colleagues, like one of my really good friends, who is a nephrologist, and we were talking about it, and she was telling me that she was going through, in vitro fertilization, which I think is there to support you and to help you. But she threw in the towel with, with trying, giving her body a chance because of the numbers and because of science. But I think, for me, I really tapped into that feminine side. And I think feminine energy is really, super strong. And I think, I don't know, I'm just one that believes in like miracles and believes in things that are really supposed to be meant for you or meant for you. And I think I sort of surrendered to the greater will of the universe. And you always talk about, God, universe, source. And that was something like I've witnessed with my patients. I've seen patients, my specialty now is cardiothoracic anesthesia. So I've seen patients that are not supposed to survive, that have heart functions of less than 5%. And sometimes it really is the little things. It's them just believing their doctors or them believing in themselves, and they just end up surprising you. And I just had to tap into that because it's like I felt like there's a huge portion of my mind that's not being used. It's not being worked. There's this energy that is there for everybody, but how do you harness it? And I'm not. And I think I realized that. And you had said this also, I'm not leaving this world without my baby. So, and I think it was, so during my first miscarriage, I remember I was at work and I couldn't find help to relieve me. So you're cramping. I saw my gestational sac in the toilet, and I remember I was being paged and I was being called to go into the room for assistance, for help. And I just remember holding, the remnants of my baby and thinking, I'm not going to do that again. I'm not going to do that again. I'm going to fight for you. There's a reason you came here once before, and I am going to learn to be the best advocate for you. And that's what my pregnancy journey has been teaching me. And that's something that, I forget what you always say about tears. Moisture.
Yeah, the moisture is the truth coming out. It's just truth coming out, Nisha. Yeah.
I think that's something that, really raised awareness for me in this journey. This baby came when she knew that I was truly ready for her, and I was to take on the responsibility for her. And I think that, I don't know, it's when you have that realization and when that just becomes just so solid, the facts don't mean anything. There was one of my colleagues' wife actually had her tubes tied, and there was no way that she was going to be pregnant. And she was having like low back pain and all of this. And she just realized, she went to the doctor and they did an ultrasound, and her husband was a doctor too. And they're like, you're pregnant. And stories like this are just, that's what I really did. I'm like, I have two options. I can either choose the miracle, or I can stay in the situation I am and not choose a miracle. And for me, the answer was just so obvious.
And I love the way that you say that, Nisha, because it's coming from a place of conviction. And actually, it's also coming from a place of personal responsibility and loving yourself enough and loving this baby enough to say, I get to choose.
Yeah.
And I think that's a faculty that we tend to forget. Our ability to think and our ability to choose absolutely determines our experience.
Yeah. It's so funny that you say that, Rosanne, because one of my really good friends, and she's an intensivist that I work with, she wrote a poem for my baby. And in the poem, and I feel like this poem speaks to me as well as it speaks to her. And and I'll send that to you via email. And if you want to share it, with all the ladies, that would be great. But it talks about how, what can you really give to the world? What, you can't, if you choose to be a martyr, you're always, you're going to have somebody that looks at you as you gave too much. If you choose to be really selfish, then you're going to have somebody that looks at you one way. But I think that your true power lies in your choice. And I found that so profound because it's something that I learned. And if there's one thing that I want to pass on to my daughter and to all the other girls and all the other women that are out there in the same struggle, you have that power of choice. And that is the determining factor that's going to flip the switch.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, because look at the change. I mean, this is such a powerful example because you came and started listening to this crazy lady's podcast, kind of on the heels of a devastating loss and a real reaffirmation of what it is that you wanted in this life. And so you started doing the work. What are some of the things that you realized about yourself in that process? What are some of the things that were like, whoa, I had no idea that was there?
I think one of the biggest things is I'm a key player in this entire process. Before coming, and I think we've talked about the backgrounds with our families and with our culture, and coming from a very strict background, you're kind of told what to do. You're expected to follow the mold, and I never thought that I had a voice and that I had a say in things. And one of the things that came out was finding my voice and finding my choice, and truly, walk through hell or high water, but like sticking to that because that it's true to your heart. And I really had to get to this point where, I remember sitting down and I'm like, what really matters to me? Does it, matter that people like me? Does it matter that my family approves? Does it matter that I have this job? What are my core beliefs? And then I realized in that I had this wonderful relationship that I never gave into. It was always there, but I never surrendered to it. And I have this, I had this dream to be a mom, but I never surrendered to the dream. And I think that was something. And then in addition to that, it was finding like-minded people that really believed in you. Like, why was I wasting my time and my energy, whether it be at the workplace, whether it be with family relations or with certain friends, with people telling you that, no, your dreams are not going to be a reality, or they're too difficult, or, your head's up in space. And I had to learn to be my own advocate. And I'm like, and learn that I really do matter. And the people that love me and the people that care for me are going to stand up for me. And that is more than enough. So much more.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that's incredible because I remember from when you started to where you are today is such a dramatic difference. There is this, I knew that there's this boldness and this self-assuredness in you, but there was kind of this this a slightly unsure Nisha. And now there's this Nisha.
Yeah. I always felt like, I don't know, I felt like there was why was I hiding behind curtains of timidness? Why was I trying to be weak? Why was I trying to be a people pleaser? I'm not that. I think, and then it was really coming down to the inside, like, who are you? I'm like, I am sassy in my own rights. Like, I am, I am fun. I am a rule breaker. I am a good person. And I refuse to have anybody put me down. I refuse to have, anybody take that away from me. It took me so long to figure that out.
But you did it.
But I did it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and so what would you say because, one of the things that happens all the time, and you're such a great example because, you're a physician, and, all of you know, your expertise, so many people are so ready to hand off their license and agency in their own lives and say, well, the doctors say that I can't do this, or the doctors say that I don't have a chance. We make our decisions based on so many things outside of us, but you made a decision based on what you knew here.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
what would you encourage people to start thinking about instead of just listening to all these numbers? Like, what would you encourage people to do instead?
There's really two ways of thinking. The first way that you think is, and some people are just trained this way, they think with their brain, then they go to their heart, and they go back to their brain. Other people think with their heart, they go to their brain, and they go back to their heart. And I think for me, being in the scientific background, being a physician, you're given facts. You're told, patients have certain survival, predictors. And so most scientists, most people think that what the doctors say is the end all be all. But it's not. We're physicians. We're not magicians. There is, I always tell my patients that that's my favorite rhyme, and I'm very proud of it.
Yeah, it's a good one.
But I think what you need to do is you need to find trust, and you say this a lot to all your mentees, that the thought is there because it was meant to be there. You don't just randomly think that I'm gonna be on the front lines, in war. It just seems like illogical. You don't just wake up thinking, well, I'm going to be a chef, or I'm going to be on this show, unless that desire is really there and it's really deep. And I think what society tries to do to us nowadays is they try to categorize us. And a lot of this has to, I feel like, deal with advertisement or this or that, but just try to put everybody in a mold. And I think what you need to realize is you're not a mold, is you're fiercely and bravely made, and you have to be strong enough to know that you thought about this, or you're thinking about this for a reason, and that's an important reason. And don't let anybody say no, or or steer you off your path. You just have to find this quiet space inside of you, and find that lion, find that tiger that's just ready to roar. And I feel like it's like a Katy Perry song, but it's true. Movies are they're great. They're like, you need to find that. I was fortunate enough that I had, a support system that fostered that, and I was able to tap in.
Yeah. That's incredible, Nisha, because when we take a look at your experience, from having these numbers that are like, well, forget it, lady, you're too old, this isn't going to happen, to being in the place where you are today. How many weeks pregnant are you?
So I am 39. So my baby actually, because I have a cephalopelvic disproportion. So Shakira is wrong, hips do lie. My baby's a little big, so we had to schedule a section. So our section is going to be next Thursday.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited for you. I mean, because think about where you're at. Right? You're not in a place where you're curled up in a ball feeling sorry for yourself. You made a decision. You're like, I know what the numbers are, but I also know what's in my heart.
Yeah.
And even with all of this, I have all this scientific training. You've seen miracles, as you've talked about. You've seen your patients, survive, and they quote unquote shouldn't have, or whatever, or the prognosis was not so good. But you went from that to working on yourself, being open. It actually takes a lot of humility, Nisha, to do what you did, to be willing to examine yourself. That's massive, especially for somebody as educated and as accomplished as you. And I don't say that just to blow smoke in your direction. It's actually true. Like, I think there's something to be said for a woman having the humility to say, hey, what I'm doing is not working. I've got to consider another way.
Yeah. And I think that was, it was like really integral. And I think you don't need to take it as a loss. I mean, I could have took it as so many ways, but I just, you just take it as a gentle reminder. There are many ways, to get things done. That there, and maybe part of that is just being like an anesthesiologist. Like when we code patients when they're dying, like you refuse to let go. You want to try everything. And I just sort of wanted to tap into that as well. And I'm like, okay, this isn't working. What will work for me? Because I know something will work, and I'm not going to leave until I find that something.
That's so quotable. It's like, I'm going to find, something that is going to work for me.
Yeah.
And it did, because you got pregnant again naturally in very short order.
We had, my partner Berkins and I, we had one cycle. We really did, because he went back to medical school. And so he was going to medical school in the Caribbean. And we petitioned to see if he could stay here in the United States so we could, work on our pregnancy journey. And the school said, absolutely not. And so we sat down and we're like, okay. I'm like, well, I'm going to do whatever I can to aid my body. And there was just not a question in, I think, both of our minds that this cycle is just not going to work. Like he was just convicted, like, from the get-go. They're like, well, why? It's just going to work. Why would it not work? And then I probably had more hesitation. I was doing everything that I could to naturally assist my body. But I think, and then I started, the program, I started assessing things, and it's just so funny how just small little shifts will just make it. And then I remember we got the phone call from, I had fired the specialist that I had down here, and, I sought out a specialist in New York, and we got a call from their office, and they're like, you're pregnant. And we were both actually on our way to Asheville for like a small little vacation. And we're like, yeah, we know. And then, and Perkins was like, who is it? I'm like, it's Dr. David, Sammy David. And he told us that we're pregnant. And then we both literally stopped. And I was still on the phone with him. I'm like, okay, I'm just kidding. I didn't really know, but I just kind of did. But we're pregnant.
Oh my gosh. And here you are.
Yeah.
I mean, but this also demonstrates how quickly a woman can change when she's made a decision. Because I think people think that these changes have to take forever. No. But when you've made a decision to be successful, they don't have to take that long.
Yeah. It's so funny. I've sort of, I've done this for a lot. Like when, after I finished pharmacy school and I decided to go back to medical school, it literally was one decision. It was when I decided to do a fellowship, it was one decision. And it's funny, I know although this has nothing to do with, our journey together, my sister, who is also an attorney and lives in California, has been trying to find a house for a long time. And I think I kind of told her, I'm like, well, you never really decided that you wanted a house. You didn't decide you wanted a career change. And so she thought about it, and she woke up and she sent an email to herself saying that I'm deciding on this. And literally within 5 weeks, she has this new job that she loves, and she has this, beautiful home that, that she got. And that's, I don't know, it's the power of choice. And I think more than humility, you just need to be strong enough to, to make that choice.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I just love it, Nisha. This makes me so freaking happy because you've been through the program. You know how much I shout about Make a decision. Just
Yeah.
make a fucking decision, because
Yeah.
when you spin, you block the miracle.
Yeah.
When you make a decision about what you're going to have, it doesn't, all the pieces are going to fall into place, but it starts with you making that decision, because once you make that decision, everything lines up and you just take that first step.
Yeah.
And when the Latin root of decision, deci, to cut, you
Yeah.
turn the ships behind you because you already know where you're headed.
And I think, I don't remember who says this, but I remember reading it and it made so much sense. You don't need to know what lies ahead of that one decision. Or like, it seems, and sometimes it does seem like I'm walking through like this blind tunnel, but take that first step and you'll slowly start to see the light. And you don't have to know, like something will just, and I know it sounds so strange, but something will just happen and you'll know where to go. You'll get like a phone call, or it'll be like an email, or it'll just be something inside, like a quiet voice telling you to go here, and you'll know what that next step is. But you just have to take that step. Don't get bogged down into thinking so much. Just, and that was a big thing for me. I had to learn to rely on my heart more than I had to rely on my thinking process. It sounds strange, right? But but I've changed the way that I just live based on that, and I am so much more happy, and I see these changes coming in my life, and it's good. It's really,
Yeah.
really
Well,
good.
and I think it's beautiful. The cardiothoracic anesthesiologist who is willing to think with her heart, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it's just incredible to me, because I think that you're living proof of the power of, taking great care of your body, taking great care of your mind, being open, tapping into your intuition, seeing yourself in a whole way, rather than looking at your body and seeing your body as just this pile of meat that doesn't work, right? And it's just seeing yourself in a completely different way.
Yeah. Yeah. And like really appreciating yourself and loving yourself. I think that is important, because if you don't, how are you going to love this little baby, and how are you going to love all the things that you're going to go through? So that was
Yeah.
important to me.
Well, and talk to us just for a moment about, like, how did shifting your mindset support you during this pregnancy? Because with your, the past loss, it would have been really easy for you to circle the drain, just waiting for something to go wrong.
Right. It was really hard, but then I had to, again, it all comes down to making a choice. I had to, am I going to choose to see the good, or am I going to fixate on what can go wrong? And I remember we had talked about this also during my first conversation, and I refused to think about how things were going to go wrong, because um, you just go down the rabbit hole with that. I'm like, but it's so much easier to think about what can go right. It's so much easier to think about the miracle and think about what you're going to do with that. And that was a choice that I made. So every time I thought about, I'm like, is this, I refuse to wait for markers. I refuse to wait for the end of the first trimester. I refuse to wait for, like, they don't do amniocentesis anymore, but, the blood test to see if anything was wrong. I refuse to wait for, like, the 20-week anatomy scan, or like, wait till you're like 32 weeks when the lungs are developed. I made that choice that, this person is inside of me for a reason, and I am going, my job is to believe in her, and my job as a mom is always going to be to believe in her and to support her, and I do that best by thinking that things are going to, like, protecting her, which I did, but not thinking this is going to go wrong, or not walking on the eggshell, not living in the eggshell, but living in the life. And I think I wanted to really enjoy this pregnancy. I don't want to be one of these miserable pregnant women, despite, all despite being advanced maternal age, despite, having to work and, do all these things. I wanted to be happy, and that's what I want to pass, that's what I wanted to pass on. So.
Yeah, no, it's incredible. And what a blessing that you're having a daughter, because you're going to be able to model this to her.
Yeah.
And let her know, because what you've created is empowered choice, Nisha, like to really show her what it's like. Here's this beautiful, educated woman saving lives, serving her patients, who dared to believe and called in her daughter, and is now going to be able to create a family that's a reflection of those values. I mean, it really is incredible. And I bet this is shaping how you show up as a physician as well.
It is. It definitely is. It changed me from being, like, I wouldn't say wishy-washy physician, but one that was self-sacrificial, to one that really was able to have boundaries and was really able to advocate, for my patients, and to advocate for my colleagues, and not be afraid, about doing it. It brought about this bolder side of me that was able to, I don't want to say take risks. That's not like the right terminology, but I'm not quite sure what it is. But it's somewhere between taking risks and going that extra mile, and just being that that voice of quiet reason, that voice of hope, that voice of, like, justice. I think in many ways.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And I think that you're an excellent example of how the quiet voice of reason does not mean erring on the side of the negative.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people say, well, just be reasonable, Nisha, be reasonable, or we should do the reasonable thing. But that version of reasonable just is always expecting the worst, is, expecting negative. But what you're talking about is something smarter.
It's something, I think it's smarter. It's something more powerful. I think it's something that, especially in this day and age, people just, in a very materialistic society, forget about. It's this reconnection,
Mm.
with yourself, and what can be done, what can't be done. Finding. I feel like we've sort of ventured into this society where with science and with all of these things, you're taking out the Gus factor. You're just sort of like, putting him in the trash can, and he doesn't, and he's just going to sit there and he's going to laugh at you because it doesn't really bother him. He knows who he is, but, you sort of, what it was, Rosanne? I feel like I became the warrior that I was meant to be. And I feel that unless I tapped into that, I wouldn't have this child. And it's really funny, because when I first got pregnant, all I thought was that I was going to have this little boy. And I was just so fixated on having this little boy. And then when I found out as a little girl, there was a period where I kind of went into shock. And so I had to take my baby to the beach, and we went on a walk, and we resolved, like, all these issues that mommy was having. But she's a girl for a reason. She's just, to be like this little warrior princess herself. And I think we need, I think we need more, women warriors out there. And that's what I'm realizing. And so I don't know, I'm just embarrassed that I was feeling that way about my little baby, but I'm so, like, excited now.
Well, I mean, but that's just another example. I love how you brought up, Gus, God, universe, source, that, so much of this we think is just numbers. We think it's just, the mechanical egg meeting the sperm. It completely eliminates the magic. Yeah. And I think it was Albert Einstein that said that the more you, or maybe that's him that said, the more you learn about science, the more you believe in God.
Yeah.
In the magic, in something bigger, and whatever people choose to call that, I think the sentiment is the same. Yeah. But so what would you want to, like, if you were going to give a few words of encouragement to the women that are listening that maybe haven't made that leap yet to see the connection between the mind and the body, and maybe are too afraid at this point to trust themselves, and are just in tyranny of the science, oh my gosh, somebody said this to me about my AMH or whatever. What would you want these women to walk away with?
I want them to throw all that bullshit in the trash. I mean, throw it in the trash. I think what was important to me is nobody knows you better than you, and nobody knows what's in your heart, and give that credence, because it's important. And it doesn't matter if in the beginning you make that choice with full conviction or you don't, but just make that choice and do whatever you can throughout your day to remind yourself of that choice, and forget about what people say. Forget about if you're like, friends think that you're crazy for like, making sure your baby's secured in the seat before you like leave, even though, your baby isn't physically there. Just know that everything is there for you. You just need to just tap into it. And that's it. Like, the biggest gift that you can give yourself is the freedom of choice and the freedom of decision.
Yeah, that's incredible, Nisha. And, I got to tell you, the work that I do in the world, you are exactly the kind of woman that I always hoped I would serve. Oh. Always. And it's just, and I think it's important to say that, because I had always hoped that it would touch women in a way that, regardless of education, regardless of experience in life, that they would find that within them, that power within them. And to see you here today in this way, and, just on the eve, basically, of about to meet this miracle baby, it just brings such joy in my heart. And I'm so grateful to you for sharing your story with the women all over the world that are going to share in this, and whose lives are going to be changed because of your courage and your bravery. So thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. I mean, my life is just, it's like, I feel like I am a stronger person, a better person. And I'm just, you'll realize, and I think this is what all, I don't know, my sisters out there to realize also, the wait is worth it. It's there for a reason. And when you see it come into fulfillment, you'll start to put the pieces of the puzzle together. There's no reason when the doctors tell you, lab value or this or that, to try to put the pieces of the puzzle, because you don't even know what the puzzle is then. So just keep on waiting and make that choice. And then, you'll be able to connect the dots, and it's just going to be, I don't know, this magical picture that you're walking into.
Well, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Nisha. This has been great. And I know that lives are going to be changed because of this, and so many will be blessed. So thank you for that.
I appreciate that.
Love this episode of the Fearlessly Fertile podcast? Subscribe now and leave an awesome review. Remember, the desire in your heart to be a mom is there because it was meant for you. When it comes to your dreams, keep saying hell yes.